Welcome to the Animation Apprentice History of Animation quiz. This is the first history quiz that we've done. This is the first even semi-academic thing that we've tried. And you're going to need three things. You're going to need a pencil. You will need a piece of paper if you want to do this properly. And you are going to need the ability to count from 1 to 99, which I'm assuming that everyone who is doing this quiz can do. So now you will also need to have your finger over the pause button, and now you will need to press pause and go and get these things, otherwise the quiz will begin. So press pause, go and get your stuff, and come back. Right, now we're off. 18,000 BC, this is question 1. What is the earliest recorded attempt to create a sense of animation motion? I should add, by the way, that at the end of this you will be graded on your knowledge of the history of animation, and I should also add that there is an excellent book on the history of animation by Charles Solomon. And Charles, if you're watching this, I'm sorry I didn't ask permission to use your book cover, but I hope you will forgive me because I am recommending your book, and an excellent book it is. So back to the question 1, 18,000 BC, the earliest recorded attempt to create a sense of animated motion. If you need time to think about this, press pause. If you don't, you will know that the answer is, of course, the Paleolithic cave paintings at Altamira in Spain. And these are, of course, some of the most famous. There are many of these paintings. Actually, there are some in the Dordogne in France. These are some of the most celebrated, and they really are remarkable. And we can say with some confidence that these are the earliest known attempts to create a sense of animation in images. Moving on now to question 2. What is going on in this image, and where is this image from? So this is kind of a two-part question. Again, if you need time to think about it, press pause. If you don't, this is a piece of pottery from Persia. It's around about 3000 BC, and you can see this little goat here is actually jumping up and eating the leaves from this tree and then kind of jumping down again. So if you were to spin the piece of pottery, you would have the illusion of motion, or rather, if you were to turn the piece of pottery, you would see the goat jumping up to eat the leaves of the tree. What about this one here? Again, a two-part question. What's happening in 2000 BC, and where is this from? The answer, of course, is these are Egyptian hieroglyphs, and this is a wrestling match. And you can see that, again, this is an early attempt to show the animation of movement. Obviously, there's no shutter, there's no actual animation, but these are the Egyptians in 2000 BC trying to create a sense of movement and motion. Okay, getting closer to the life of Christ, 180 AD. We've actually skipped the birth and death of Christ here. But what animation technique did the Chinese invent? What animation technique did the Chinese invent? And the answer is the Zoetrope, and this was invented by Ting Huan in China. We will find out more about the Zoetrope later on, but as with so many things, the Chinese got there first. It was then long forgotten and rediscovered by the West much later on. So there is a clue that it's going to be coming back later. Okay, 1824, that's a big leap. We've just made a very big leap. Not much happened in the preceding 1600 years, but British physician Peter Mark Roget, who is famous for Roget's thesaurus, published a scientific paper discovering or describing what phenomenon about the human eye. And what did he discover about the human eye that is so important about animation, so important for the study of animation? And the answer is persistence of vision. His paper was called The Explanation of an Optical Deception in the Appearance of the Spokes of a Wheel when Seen Through Vertical Apertures. It's persistence of vision. Of course, this is not just about the history of animation. This is about the history of cinema. Very, very important to cinema. And as you know, a film runs at 24 frames a second, and the eye can, in fact, see an individual image that's held for about 1/18 of a second, which is why film runs at 24 frames a second. So you cannot perceive something that is held for 1/24 of a second. 1828, Duke of Wellington's Prime Minister. That is irrelevant, but at this time, in 1828, what was the first form of actual animation since the Chinese, since the Zoetrope? And the answer is the Thaumatrope. This was popular in Victorian Europe, and it's essentially a disc. You can make one very easily. You have your little birdie here on this side, a cage on this side, and if you spin this, it will look like these two objects are on top of each other, and you will have the illusion of the bird being in the cage. 1832, the Thaumatrope is improved, allowing the use of more than 2 images. What was the improvement to the Thaumatrope? And the answer is the ludoscope. invented in 1832 by the Belgian. Don't let anyone tell you that the Belgians have not contributed anything to Western civilization. Joseph Plateau invented the I can't even pronounce this, phenakitoscope. Or ludoscope. Ludoscope, we'll stick with that. That's much easier. You can actually see a bunch of this stuff if you ever want to go to the to Lyon, which is I highly recommend. There's an excellent museum of the Lumiere brothers who did a lot of their pioneering work in Lyon. It's kind of the home of cinema. The French got there first, but it was this Belgian who invented the ludoscope, and he is the important guy for our purposes today. Now, what comes after the ludoscope in 1860? What comes next? And the answer is the zoetrope, back to our Chinese invention. So the zoetrope is essentially reinvented, and the slits in the wheel, you can see these little slits here in the wheel. As you spin it round, these act as like the shutter in a camera, and they create the illusion of motion. In this case, it's a juggler, and this is still a fun exercise to do with kids or indeed with animation classes. People can make their own little animated things to go inside the wheel, and you can actually make your own primitive animation. 1868, the first flip book was invented by John Bames Linnett. And what did he call it? And the answer is the kineograph. And actually it was in the preceding, so you get a free one there. It was in the preceding image. The kineograph was what the flip book, what we call today a flip book, that's what it was called. In 1877, question number 11, what variation on the zoetrope was invented in France by Charles-Emile Reynaud? This is a variation on the zoetrope, an improvement on the zoetrope. And the answer is the praxinoscope. And this is basically exactly the same as a zoetrope, only it's done with mirrors, and the image is reflected on the inside surface of the mirrors as you spin the wheel. You can buy both of these at Amazon, by the way, but you can buy zoetropes and praxinoscopes at Amazon if you feel like startling your friends with your historic animation toys. 1880, who was hired to solve a bet? And the bet was whether a horse in a gallop has all 4 feet off the ground at the same time. And this was much bet on in the 19th century because, of course, when you watch a horse running, you cannot tell. Is there a moment when all 4 feet are off the ground or isn't there? And we know the answer to this today. And the man who solved this was the very famous Edward Muybridge, who spelt his name Edward in a very strange way. Muybridge was an amazing individual, and his work is still used as reference by animation students today. Very, very impressive, all now public domain, which is very handy, but still incredibly useful for the study of animation. 1890, Thomas Edison invented what? Now, he's of course famous for inventing the light bulb, but in terms of animation and filmmaking, what did Thomas Edison invent? And the answer is the kinetoscope. So this is really about movie history rather than specifically about animation history, but of course, animation is part of filmmaking. The kinetoscope was the precursor to the movie projector. So that was really the beginnings of film. And people would pay money, 25 cents, a lot of money at the time, to watch a few minutes of film, often of a rather saucy nature, in these kinetoscopes in arcades. In 1891, question number 14, who projected animated pictures on the screen for the first time? So the first actual projection of animated images. And the answer is Charles-Emile Reynaud. So French invention, or rather perhaps Belgian, but anyway, it's the Théâtre Optique, and that was the first time they had been projected on the wall, back in 1891. In 1894, it was actually the mutoscope that was invented next. That's not a question, that's a statement. Popular in penny arcades, and you can see on the right a clue as to what people were looking at back then in 1894. Not much difference these days either. 1898, question 15, who invented stop motion animation? And the answer is the first stop motion animation was the Humpty Dumpty Circus, and it was invented by Albert E. Smith and JStuart Blackton. They are not well remembered today, but they did the first stop motion animation, Wallace and Gromit Eat Your Heart Out. 1906, question 16. Using Edison's new camera, JStuart Blackton, same dude, created what animation using a blackboard? This is in 1906. We're in the 20th century now. Question 16, and the answer is humorous phases of funny faces. I'm sure you remember that well. Made by the Vitagraph Co. of America. This is where America now starts to take the lead and become the animation pioneer that it remains for the next 100 years. This is it. Some nice pictures here. These humorous faces of funny faces. In 1913, question 17, what was the first animal cartoon character? The very first animal cartoon character is not Mickey Mouse, is not Donald Duck, is not Bugs Bunny. It was, in fact, Old Doc Yak. Yes, not well remembered now. He was a kind of billy goat with a tail goat and striped pants. Not stripped pants, but striped pants, that should read. Sorry about that, typos, but too late now. Moving on now to 1914, question 18. What animated film character did Windsor Mckay, who's a well-known newspaper cartoonist, create? Windsor Mckay. Clue is that this was the first animated cartoon that really had personality. And the answer is, and you should get this if you know anything about animated film history, Gertie the Dinosaur. Gertie the Dinosaur really was an amazing creation, and he used to do this show, and I was once privileged to attend. I was privileged to watch an actual demonstration of this by the Oscar-winning John Canemaker, who actually gave us a show of Windsor Mckay doing Gertie the Dinosaur, and he acted out the whole thing with Mckay saying, yes, her name is Gertie, come out of that cave and do everything I tell her to do. He did it just like Mckay would have done it back in 1914. Amazing audiences with his astounding animation. Okay, question number 19. What was the first ever animated feature film? And the clue is it is not Snow White. And this is a tricky one. I did not know this until I came across it. The answer is El Apostol. Again, is long forgotten now, Quirino Cristiani from Argentina. And one of the reasons why it's not well known now is because there are no surviving copies. So if you're going to make an animated film, remember to keep a copy, at least for yourself. Next question, question 20. What World War I propaganda movie did Windsor Mckay animate in order to support the US war effort? World War I propaganda movie. But again, the very, very talented Windsor Mckay. And the answer is The Sinking of the Lusitania. This is an excellent film. It is war propaganda, but it is nonetheless very, very good. It's sort of interspersed with lots of slides saying the dastardly Hun and this sort of thing. But if you don't mind that kind of thing, and if you're not sensitive about war propaganda, it's a great and beautifully animated film. Question 21. Who was the first big cartoon superstar? And this was before Mickey Mouse. The first really big cartoon superstar. And the answer is Felix the Cat. He was the first. He was, of course, not in colour back in 1919, but he was the first really, really big star, even before Disney. And again, as you can see, we're very much in the land of America now. The United States has taken the lead in animation and will not relinquish it for another 100 years. Which cartoon character did the Max Fleischer Studio create by filming a live-action person in a clown suit and then rotoscoping it? And the answer is Coco the Clown. Again, not terribly well remembered these days. Next question. Yes, it was Coco the Clown was part of the Out of the Inkwell series, which did very, very well. And again, this was really before the glory days of the Inkwell. Max Fleischer will, of course, come back later on. But in 1923, Walt Disney appears. He moved from Kansas City to Hollywood after the success of what series starring a live-action girl? We are still in the world before Mickey Mouse here. And the answer is the Alice series. Alice's Day at Sea. Again, not very, very well remembered. The one on the left is really rather peculiar. Anyway, the Alice series, we'll move on quickly to the next question. Question 24. Which character did Disney create, but which was soon taken away from him? Again, we are in the years before Mickey Mouse. Character that Disney created that was taken away from him. And the answer is Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. And you can see that Oswald actually looks very similar to Mickey Mouse, but he had these very floaty ears. One of the reasons why when Disney created Mickey Mouse, he made the ears the way they were was to avoid having to animate the overlapping action on these ears. Anyway, Disney created this for Charles Mintz, and they had a falling out. Disney left, Mintz got the rights to Oswald, and Disney said, fine, I will make a mouse. And no one remembers Charles Mintz. We all remember, however, Disney and his mouse. Which cartoon character did Disney create after setting up his own studio? Question 25, and the answer is yes, we got there at last. Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie. First animated cartoon with sound. Really, really well worth watching. Fantastic film. And moving on to who drew most of Mickey, because of course it wasn't actually Disney by this stage who was doing most of the animation. Disney quickly realized he could hire people who were more talented than himself at the actual bit of business of drawing. Who drew most of the Mickey animation? And the answer is Iworks. And he was one of Disney's most loyal animators. He worked for him for many, many years. But he had been at Mint Studios, and he left and went with Disney. He would later do the multi-plane camera. A very talented man. 1929, question 27. Terrytoons opened and created a very popular pair of crows. What were they called? And the answer is Heckle and Jeckle. They were huge, huge stars, really, really big back in the day. I remember watching them when I was a kid back in the 1970s. They were still running Heckle and Jeckle cartoons on American TV. Next question. Question 28. Grim Natwick at the flight. That's Grim. That's above him. Don't know who the kid is in the distance. They're at my dad's studio in Soho Square in the 70s. Anyway, Grim Natwick at the Max Fleischer Studio created which sexy cartoon icon? Grim Natwick's claim to fame. And the answer is Betty Boop. Boop, boop, beep, doop, oop. Sorry, that was really badly done, but still, that's what she's famous for. She was wonderful. I think she originally began her life as a dog, but they took the ears off and made her into whatever it is she is now. Yes, anyway. And the next question is, question 29. Two animators, Hugh, Harman, and Rudy Ising, left Disney to help form which animation studio with Leon Schlesinger? Two animators. What was the studio that they helped to form? And the answer is Warner Brothers. This was the first Looney Tunes. They were made at the Harman Ising studio, and they were distributed through Warner Brothers Studios. Then later on, all these people fell out. There was lots of sort of combining and recombining and uncombining back in the 30s. Anyway, in 1932, Disney Cartoon was the first to introduce color. Notice we're using the American spelling of color as a nod to the fact that we're really in the United States here. And this was the first to win an Academy Award. What was that? And the answer is Flowers and Trees. Very nicely done, very cute, very well worth watching. First Academy Award for animated short subjects. Next question. And that was, of course, distributed by United Artists, and it was a Walt Disney Silly Symphony. 1933, Hugh Harman and Rudy Ising, of whom we heard earlier, left Warner Brothers. They were all falling out at this time. They formed another animation branch at which major studio? They left Warner's and became MGM, the famous MGM Studios, Ars Gratia Artis, still alive and well just about and surviving on the Bond franchise today. Next question, 1933, question 32. Max Fleischer, that should read, you know who Max Fleischer is, Max Fleischer, but again, typos too late. Max Fleischer Studio created which popular character who ate spinach? And if you don't know this one, you really have been living under a rock. And the answer is Popeye. And again, these were outrageously popular. They were still running when I was a kid. We used to watch them in the States in the 1970s. They were still running on TV then. Fantastic cartoons. And 1934, question 33. Iworks at the Disney studio, of whom we heard earlier, created what invention which helped create a feeling of depth in animation? It was first seen in the short film The Old Mill. I may already have given away the answer to this question. That is a clue. And the answer is the multi-plane camera. Really huge, massive invention by Disney, created an illusion of depth in animated films, and really made Disney's films way more cinematic than anybody else was capable of doing at the time. Now, of course, it's very easy to do with digital layers, but at the time it was incredibly revolutionary and expensive and difficult and pioneering. 1937, question 34. Which famous duck was invented by Warner Brothers? And I'm going to pause for you to write this one down. Hopefully you do know the answer to this one. The answer is Daffy Duck. This is an early Daffy. He's made some serious changes since then. But very, very popular character, remains very popular today. 1937, question 35. What film was known as Disney's Folly before its premiere? Misspelling on ITS, too late to go back and change the typos. But Disney's Folly, what was that? And of course it was Disney's Folly because he spent so much money on it. But that was before it came out. And the answer is Snow White. Disney's Folly because he spent millions of dollars on it. Of course, it became one of the most successful animated films of all time and made the studio tons of money and enabled them to build their Burbank studio. of the profits of Snow White. 1940, what famous bird was invented by the Walter Lantz Studio? Famous bird invented by the Walter Lantz Studio. And the answer is Woody Woodpecker. Can you do his laugh? I'm not going to try to. I remember trying to do this as a kid. I was useless. I'm still useless now, so I'm not going to do the laugh, but have fun trying to do Woody Woodpecker's laugh. And 1940, still in 1940, question 37. What was the follow-up movie to Snow White, that's Disney's Snow White, which did not make money at the box office? So this, in a way, really was Disney's Folly. The follow-up movie to Snow White, which did not make money at the box office. And the answer is Pinocchio. Did not make any money. It cost $2,289,000 to make, and it made very little money by 1947. Now, that was not because this film was not popular, but what was happening in 1940. And the answer, of course, is World War II. There were no European markets for Disney films, and Disney lost a lot of money. Not because the films were not good or popular, but because people simply could not pay to go to movies. 1940, question 38, and I'm just going to wrap up this first part of the quiz. What was the third Disney feature based on classical music? The third Disney feature based on classical music. And the answer is Fantasia. Also did not make money. 39. At Warner Brothers, Tex Avery created what famous cartoon rabbit? Famous Warner Brothers rabbit. And the answer is Bugs Bunny, of course. The famous rabbit, still very popular today. Question 40. At MGM Studio, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera created what cat and mouse duo? Cat and Mouse Duo by William Hanna and Joseph Barbera. And the answer is Tom and Jerry. Again, huge stars. We're really in the golden age of animation now. So many huge stars being made. These short films are incredibly popular. They were played with longer movies at movie houses. There's the golden age of Hollywood, golden age of animation. 1941. What was the fourth Disney release which also did not make any money? Fourth Disney release. And the answer is Dumbo. Flying Elephants did not make money. Again, partly because of the war. 42. What is this image about? What is going on here? We're in 1941 now. Somebody's saying happy birthday, Walt, but these men do not look like they're in a good mood. What is this image about? And the answer is the strike. This was the Disney animation strike. And it was very unpleasant, and many people say it broke the studio. And many of the Disney artists who were fired after the strike left and developed a limited animation style which was non-Disney and remains very popular to this day. What was that studio? And the answer is UPA. Still really, really popular. A lot of people still make films in the UPA style to this day. Very, very advanced design for the time. 44. What Disney film killed off a major character in the first few minutes? 1942. And the answer is Bambi. Bambi's mother dies very early on in the film. Very, very sad. A lot of people are not happy about that. Question 45. Terrytoons introduced which opera singing character? It was an opera singing character introduced by Terrytoons in 1942. And the answer is Mighty Mouse. He sang a tenor. Question 46. After World War II, in 1942, this is actually World War II is still going on here, Disney went down to South America and made what feature working with the United States government? And the answer is Saludos Amigos, which was a mixture of live action and animation. Question 47. Tex Avery is most famous for his crazy characters like this crazy wolf. What is the name of the deadpan dog that he created at MGM? A deadpan dog created by Tex Avery. And the answer is Droopy Dog. And for the follow-up question, question 48, who voiced him in the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Fast forwarding 50 years. Who voiced Droopy in the 1998 film Who Framed Roger Rabbit? And the answer is, it was my dad. Did a very nice job too. You can see him there in the credits. Question 49. What was Disney's follow-up to Saludos Amigos, still set in South America, this time starting 3 characters? Follow-up to Saludos Amigos in South America. And the answer is the 3 Caballeros. And we're now going to move on, and we've now left the war years. We're going to go on to question 50, but I'm going to pause, and this video is getting a little long, and I'm going to put this one into the next video. So stay tuned for part 2.